The year is 2005, 6 years after the downfall of Zanzibar land. A renegade genetically enhanced Special Forces unit, Foxhound, has seized a remote island in Alaska's Fox Archipelago, codenamed Shadow Moses. Sound familiar? Enter Metal Gear Solid, and welcome to your Hungover Gaming Retrospective, the inaugural episode. This show aims to delve deep into games that were pioneers of their time, which dared to change the gaming landscape as we knew it. What better game to start this series off with than Metal Gear Solid, a game that, with lack of a better phrase, changed the game. From gameplay to complex storylines to just plain weird but hilarious humor, this game had it all. So without further ado, let's get started.
Snake! What happened? Snake! Snake!
Yes, Metal Gear Solid, the game that started it all. Well, unless you count Metal Gear 1 for the MSX2 and heavily modded NES port, and also Metal Gear 2 for the NES. Both NES games were made without the supervision of one Hideo Kojima. Wait! How did we make it this far into a video about Metal Gear Solid without even mentioning Hideo Kojima? Yes, Hideo Kojima, the mastermind himself, along with a very talented team of level designers, art directors, and programmers, designed Metal Gear Solid, and since then, has become synonymous with the game franchise, which comprises 5 main Metal Gear Solid games and many spin-offs that I won't go into in this video, spanning across 4 console generations. Phew, that was a mouthful. So where do we begin? How about the time period this game was released in? PlayStation 1, circa 1998, leading the year off with 2 blockbuster hits in Resident Evil 2 and Final Fantasy Tactics in North America was nothing to scoff at. Those 2 games deserve a video on their own. PlayStation 1 was about a little more than halfway through its console cycle, going head-to-head with the gaming titan Nintendo, which some would say releases games targeted towards a younger audience in the likes of Mario, Zelda, and Donkey Kong. The PlayStation was also competing against the Sega Saturn, but we all know that console led to the Sega Dreamcast, and well, we all know what happened to that console. While the PlayStation might have been the new kid on the block in comparison to Sega and Nintendo, Sony was putting up more than a fight when it came to the market share. Their sleek new console running games on CDs provided more memory for developers to work with at much lower costs than Nintendo's proprietary cartridges for the N64. This attracted a lot of third-party support. One such publisher, Konami, which seems to be phasing into the pachinko machine-making business and phasing out of the games-making business now, decided to publish a game on the PlayStation. Konami is a company that originated in 1969 as a jukebox rental and repair business in Osaka, Japan. But since then has moved into making video games. A few popular franchises such as Suikoden, Castlevania, Frogger, Gradius, and Contra, to name a few. Konami commissioned Hideo Kojima and his team of programmers and game designers to make a game that would change gaming history for the better. We previously mentioned the original Metal Gear for the MSX2. Konami also published that game and thus knew what caliber of game they were funding. But I'm not entirely sure they were so sure what they were getting into when they decided to fund a fully realized 3D sequel to that game on the PlayStation. But judging by the relationship between Hideo Kojima and Konami now, I don't know if we will ever hear that story. Where the original Metal Gear introduced the main character Solid Snake and also introduced action stealth gameplay back in 1987, its antiquated pixel graphics and overhead fixed camera were about to be blown out of the water. Okay, so it might not look amazing by 2017 standards, but this game came out in 1998 for Big Boss's sake. The game stayed true to its roots of tactical espionage action in that it starred the same protagonist, Solid Snake, and for most of the game it kept an overhead camera, with the addition of a first-person camera view when Snake is crawling under tight spaces or using a sniper rifle or binoculars. While the plot of the entire Metal Gear series takes place over 5.5 decades, Metal Gear Solid takes place in the year 2005. The aforementioned Foxhound Special Unit threatens to use the nuclear-capable mech Metal Gear Rex against the US government if they do not receive the remains of Big Boss and the ransom of $1 billion within 24 hours. This forces Solid Snake out of retirement by Colonel Campbell to infiltrate the island of Shadow Moses and neutralize the threat. Without doubt, a story epic enough for the Metal Gear series, but this one drew heavy influences from many different types of media, particularly movies, of which a few notable movies that inspired Hideo Kojima when directing and designing the game were Akira, The Fury, Apocalypse Now, Rambo, and Full Metal Jacket. These are certainly some of my favorite movies, so it makes sense that the game inspired by them would also be one of my favorite games. Along with epic movie influences came cinematic cutscenes that ultimately sealed the deal when it came to the overall polish of the game. The cutscenes were made with polygons that were rendered in real time on the PlayStation 1 hardware, and had a very cinematic feel to them, which immersed you in a sense that you were watching a movie, not to mention they were longer than a feature-length film in total. This was all tied together by excellent writing and voice acting. Probably most notable is David Hayter, who voiced Solid Snake for the first 4 Metal Gear Solid games.
Snake, are you okay? I've been better.
Each character in the game had a uniqueness to them that is unrivaled in video games. You'd be hard-pressed to find a better cast of characters in any one game. From Revolver Ocelot to Psycho Mantis to even the DARPA chief himself, this game is just badass. Every boss fight is memorable in its own way, but they all showed a level of thought that challenged the players in ways that they had never been challenged before. Probably most notable is the Psycho Mantis boss fight, where he reads your memory card. Yes, prior to the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, all save data was saved on a memory card, particularly for consoles, kind of like a proprietary USB flash drive. Psycho Mantis reading your memory card might not seem that daunting, but he blows your mind by telling you what games you've been playing. He also messes with your mind by changing the TV inputs and making you switch controller ports halfway through the boss fight. The likes of a boss fight like that blew my mind as a kid, and I'm sure it blew the minds of many people who played the game time and time again.
No, there's no need for words, Snake. I'm Psycho Mantis!
But that was a boss fight everyone had to go through if they wanted to beat the game. So what about the secret hidden stuff? Well, this being a Hideo Kojima game, there was plenty of that too. This game is riddled with Easter eggs and advanced techniques for getting through situations that made the game really replayable. Things that make sense in the real world that you wouldn't expect to be able to do in a video game at the time because, well, you were never presented with the option, were the little details that elevated this game to a masterpiece. For instance, you can smoke cigarettes in the game, something that many people do multiple times a day, and Snake is known for smoking cigarettes as part of his persona, so it didn't seem too useful. Until you smoked a cigarette near an infrared laser that would set off an alert phase if you walked through it, but you can now see it because of the smoke. It was little details like that that made this game mind-blowing. You could play the whole game through and never even use the cigarettes, but yes, even cigarettes have a use in this game.
Are you smoking?
Yeah, so what?
Didn't you know that cigarettes contain benzopyrene, a chemical that leads to lung cancer? We now know that when benzopyrene enters the body, it changes to benzopyrene diolipoxide, BPDE, and attaches to the receptors on the p53 gene, the gene which causes lung cancer. The BPDE attaches to the p53 gene in 3 specific locations and causes precancerous changes to the lung tissue.
You know a lot about science, but you don't know how good a cigarette tastes in the morning.
All these things contributed to the presentation of this game and created the feeling of an epic spy movie where you truly felt like a total badass. Very few, if any, games prior to Metal Gear Solid gave you this level of story, character development, and fun gameplay. This game came out in a time where games were seen as more of a toy for children, but it proved with the level of polish and gameplay and presentation, and a story that you could study for hours on end and still be confused about, that games could be more than just something for kids. that games can be a form of art, an interactive way of telling a story that is unlike any other medium. That players can find a connection with strong characters that are developed over an entire game series, and that players can have a sense of empowerment and accomplishment when they look back at all that they have done by the end of the game. Metal Gear Solid will go down in history as a truly revolutionary game, not only just in the stealth genre, but the gaming industry as a whole. It drew from so many pop culture icons and popular movie genres, and built upon them to make something different that was unique and led to a breakthrough in games to come. Backed up by fun gameplay, an amazing cast of characters, and a level of charm you could only really call it a Kojima production, this game had and continues to have it all. If you haven't guessed, I really like this game, and I highly recommend that you play it, either in its original form on the PlayStation or on the GameCube in the remade form called Twin Snakes. And with that brings us to the end of the inaugural episode of Hungover Gaming Retrospective. How did we do? Tell us in the comments section below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you get the chance. I'd also like to take this time to plug our podcast that comes out on iTunes and SoundCloud in audio form, and also on YouTube on this channel in video form every Monday at 9 a.m., where we talk about games and politics and everything in between. And you can totally send us a message or anything like that if you have any questions, or if you want to see a particular game covered in Hungover Gaming Retrospective. You can also check out our Let's Play series on Fridays, where we play multiplayer games and single-player games. Maybe we'll even touch upon Metal Gear Solid one day if we get around to it. But until next time, guys, I'm Julien, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. So peace out.
She